Hi, nature friends. I thought today I would offer some suggestions about getting started learning about nature. I know it can be a daunting thought for many people just because there's so many species out there, and how do you go about learning everything? So much to know about them all. But it doesn't have to be. And I think that how you approach your learning can make a lot of difference in how easy you find it and how quickly you learn. So yes, these are going to be, I think I'll have about 5 tips that will hopefully help you get started in your learning journey if you're just getting started, or might make it a little bit easier for you if you've already started and are finding it tough or want some advice. So my first tip is to get outside. Just get out as much as you can, get out and explore. If you're not getting out onto the trails, if you're not getting out into these natural spaces, it's going to be a lot harder, or it's going to take you a lot longer to start picking things up, and you'll likely forget a lot of what you learn from outing to outing if you're not out very often. And I know that that can be tough if you're in a urban environment or suburban environment, especially if you work a busy job. But even if you're just out exploring your backyard or the little parquet paths in towns, often have an okay diversity of natural species around. So it's worth getting out as much as you can to whatever spaces you have, just to explore. The second tip is to pay attention. Pay attention to what you're looking at and look closer to the things that you might otherwise normally walk by. So when you're out on a path like this, it's really easy to just walk straight along, and you'll enjoy looking at the trees and the plants and what's going on around you, enjoy listening to the birds. But if you're not paying attention to what you're walking by, it'll just be green space with animals in it, and it will be harder to pick up on the differences in things that you're seeing, what makes them unique, and start to learn the different types of things that are around in the space. Once you start paying closer attention too, you'll start to notice things that you might never have seen before, that you would have walked by and never have noticed that they're even there. Like they might be bugs tucked up in the leaves on a tree, that unless you pause to look closely at those leaves, you would never know that they're there. Same with birds or amphibians or that sort of thing. It's really easy to walk past a lot of these organisms without even stopping to even realize that they're there. So getting out, paying attention to what you're walking by, slowing down enough to see what's around. Really important to starting to learn about nature and just appreciating the diversity of things that are around. Number 3 is not necessarily vital to have, but it will help you in your journey, and that is to have a certain number of tools at your disposal to help you with your learning. So the thing that most people would think about when you're thinking about tools, of course, is binoculars for looking at birds, maybe a net for looking at bugs or certain insects, or a dipping net that will help you look at stuff in ponds, tools like that. And they can be helpful. They will help you see a lot of things more closely, especially binoculars if you're interested in birds. But you don't have to have them to get started looking at nature. Just paying attention to what's on the sides of the trails is a great first step. If you do want to invest in some tools, you don't actually have to spend a whole lot. A net from the dollar store would be perfectly sufficient for catching things initially. You can get perfectly reasonable beginner binoculars off Amazon for like $25, $30. I bought a pair of $30 ones for my mom because she just wanted a little pair to keep by her bird feeders so that she could peek out now and then. I have a much more expensive pair myself, of course, but testing those ones, I thought they were perfectly adequate for getting started, so you don't have to spend a lot. And they do help open up the world of what you're seeing a little bit more, which is great. Your phone can also be a great tool for helping you see things more closely or to appreciate things better, especially smaller things like bugs or little mushrooms, stuff that your eye would have difficulty seeing on its own, but that if you take a picture you can zoom in. That will help you a lot in getting to understand the differences and see the uniqueness of a lot of the species that is around that you might otherwise miss if you aren't looking closely. Of course, field guides are a really good tool for helping you learn about things. If you have specific groups of organisms that you're interested in learning about, investing in a good field guide is definitely worth doing. I'll probably talk about my favorite guides in a future video, but there are some really good ones out there. You can look at Amazon reviews if you want, or take them out of your library. Your library will have a lot of guides to the local species in your area, and you don't have to spend a lot to get some good guides. If you're going to the library, you don't have to spend anything at all. Guides can be a little on the pricey side, so just starting out with the one or two that you're most interested in learning about, whether that be birds or wildflowers or whatever you want to start with, butterflies. Getting those to look at will help, both in terms of looking things up when you want to know something that you've seen, and also flipping through to familiarize yourself with what is around and what you might see in the future. Both really useful for both those purposes. Chip, come on, we're gonna turn around. Ooh, getting a bit of a halo effect now, I think. Hopefully it doesn't cause too much glare. Another tool that is very, very useful is websites. And there are a lot of them out there for learning about different things. It's really easy to just Google whatever it is you're interested in learning about, and lots of website options will pop up. The ones that I really recommend, though, as a beginner are iNaturalist for virtually anything that's alive. It's a citizen science tool where you upload your observations. It has an AI-based identification suggestion system. It's not perfect, but it is really, really good. So it kind of functions as another field guide to help you in learning what's in your area, what you're seeing. And it's also got a community element where other people will help you with your identifications and can give you feedback on stuff you don't know, or stuff that you may have gotten wrong. So it's really good in that sense, and it's also good for tracking what you have seen, so you can look back at what you've already observed in an area and remind yourself of what species you should expect to encounter. So I'll talk about iNaturalist and other apps again in another video down the road, but that is something that's worth checking out if you're interested in learning. All of these tools can help you in getting more familiar with what's around you, and also building a support community that will help you with your identifications and learning to identify, learning to understand what you're encountering. tip number 4 is patience. Have patience and get out there as often as you can to develop the repetition and practice. I mentioned this a little bit with number 1, but if you're not getting out, if you're not putting in the repetition and the practice, this is like anything. This is like learning to play an instrument or learning to do a new craft or whatever it is that you're doing. But the more often you're getting out and doing it, the more often you're exposing yourself to these species, the easier it's going to be to remember what you've seen, how it's different from other things you've seen, what you can reasonably expect in any given habitat. Because of course some things occur in certain habitats like forests that you won't find in meadows. And just experience is your best teacher. Getting out, getting in the practice as much as you can, and then remembering that, like all learning, it takes time. The more practice you get in, the better you'll get, but it will require patience. You're not going to be terrific on day 1 or week 1 or even year 1, quite honestly. I've been doing nature stuff for more than 2 decades now, and I still don't know a lot. I mean, I know a lot more than many people. I know more than anyone I personally encounter in my day-to-day life, but I am by far an expert. So it takes a long time, and it takes a lot of practice and repetition, paying attention in order to get good at these things. So give yourself a bit of permission to take it slow, to learn slowly. Don't feel bad if you aren't picking things up really quickly, or if you're encountering a species where you've seen it a dozen times and you still don't recognize it, you still don't know how to identify it on your 13th viewing. Happens to me all the time. So give yourself some permission to take it slow, and have patience. Every year you'll get a little bit better. Every month you'll get a little bit better. And eventually you'll feel pretty comfortable with what you're seeing around. And my last tip kind of ties into that, which is to take it one piece at a time. Go slowly. Focus on different areas of organisms. Don't try and learn everything all at once. Don't try and learn right down to the most rarest encounters that you have and expect to be able to remember those. Start with the common stuff. Start with the stuff that's abundant around you and that's easy to recognize, like begin by learning trees, or your common wildflowers in your area, or some of the birds that come to your backyard feeders. Pick something that's a small subset of the organisms in an area and that you encounter on a regular basis. Start with those, and then you can build on that knowledge as you're expanding into other areas. Ooh, it's starting to get a bit windy here. Oh, hopefully sit here so you don't get as much wind. But if you're taking it one piece at a time, it's going to make it a lot easier to build your entire knowledge base. It's just like climbing stairs. You're not going to jump from one floor to the next all in one bound. You take it one step at a time and eventually you'll get to the top. So, or one step at a time down a trail and eventually you'll get down to the end. So if you're going slowly, you're focusing piece by piece, eventually you'll reach the end. The end. There's never an end with nature learning. But eventually you'll get to a place where you're feeling more comfortable with your knowledge and your ID of the organisms around you. And it'll make it easier at that point to expand into more niche knowledge, niche learning than what you started out with. But it also makes it less daunting if you're thinking, I don't need to know everything in nature right now. I just want to learn the trees in my backyard. or I just want to learn the trees that are in my local park, or whatever it is that you start with. Makes it a lot easier to get started, get your foot in the water and wade in. So those are my 5 tips for learning how to learn about nature, basically. And hopefully you'll find them helpful and can apply them to your own learning as you're going out into whatever trails or backyards or nature-y places that you like to spend time. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them below. Otherwise, get out there, explore, tell me what you're seeing, and I hope you have a great time. Thanks for joining me. I'll talk to you later. Bye.